everyone. Today, we're going to be discussing some simple math and value retrieval operations in Qualtrics through looking at a simple beauty contest experiment. In this game, you are playing against 3 other bots over 1 round. Both you and the bots guess a number between 0 and 100. From everyone's guesses, a quote-unquote winning number or golden value is calculated as 2/3 times the average of everyone's guesses, which is both yours and the bot's guesses. You succeed in the game if your guess is closer to the winning number, and you're not quite sure what the guessing behavior of the bots are. That's something that you're supposed to feel out over multiple rounds, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll only be playing 1 round. So let's just play through the game and see how it works. So here we're guessing a number between 0 and 100. Our goal is to get closest to the winning value, which is 2/3 times the average of your guess and 3 other bots' guesses. Since we don't understand the bots' guessing behavior, I'd guess that they're probably going to guess around an average of 50. So 2/3 times 50 would be 33-ish. So I'm going to guess right around 33 so that I can be closer to the winning value than everyone else. So as we see here, the bots guessed 68, 19, and 39. Here was our average over all 4 of our guesses. And this is the golden value. We guessed 32. We didn't do a bad job. We were only 4 away from the golden value, so that's great. So some important things that we see here displayed on the results screen. We are able to access the average of everyone's guesses, which is a variable calculation using the bot's guesses and our guess. We're also able to do an additional calculation to retrieve the golden value and our own guess as well. So how did we get here? Let's go through the operations that make these calculations and variable displays possible. Okay. So the first thing we're going to go through is Qualtrics math. So we're going to run through some simple math operations using sort of the Qualtrics math language. This non-JavaScript method for number and variable calculations is a lot more clunky and tedious than the JavaScript version, but might be easier to understand for first-time Qualtrics users or coders. We're going to start with a simple numerical example. So the first thing I'm going to do is assign a variable to our calculation. Since we're doing a demonstration, I'm just going to call it demonstration. And sort of the biggest overarching thing about Qualtrics math is that all operations have to be conducted within this syntax, a $, an E, and open brackets. Within the brackets is where you put whatever numerical or variable operation that you want to include. Another really important thing to remember during Qualtrics math is that whenever you're writing out an equation or some numerical calculation, you need a space between the brackets and each number you're using and each operator. So there needs to be a space between everything within the brackets, including from the sides of the brackets. So just to help everybody visualize that a little bit easier, as you can see, I put a space right here, and I'm going to do 4 + 4, and then I put a space between the 4 and the plus, and I put another space between the plus and the 4, and there's a space between the 4 and the bracket. I think it's becoming a little bit more clear why the Qualtrics method is a little bit harder to use, because if you're not using this syntax correctly, or you miss even one space, the whole operation doesn't work. It reads as invalid expressions. So JavaScript is a little bit better to use for math purposes, but if you're just doing some simple operations, Qualtrics math isn't the worst way to go. So knowing how to add 4 + 4 is great, but performing math operations on survey answers or survey variables could be more useful to your experiment. So this is where something called pipe text comes in. So I'm just going to sort of talk about pipe text. So pipe text is basically how you access a survey variable or a participant answer that, or it's maybe like a slider that the participant answered earlier in the survey, which we have in this experiment, or a multiple choice question. Through pipe text, we're able to access that answer and use it later in the survey for operations, which is really cool. So I think for me, the easiest way to access pipe text is not typing it out myself, because Qualtrics is very error prone syntax wise. You could do this either in the survey flow or in a sort of empty survey question. This is what I always do, so I'll sort of demonstrate. Okay, say we want to access the value of bot number 1's guess between 0 and 100 for whatever calculation we want to do. So what we would do is go to the pipe text menu, go to embedded data field, because the bot behavior and the random guess between 0 and 100 was something that I coded within the survey flow and not within JavaScript, just for ease. So it would be counted as an embedded data field. So I'm gonna go down our list of embedded variables that the survey has saved, click on bot 1 and add insert. So this is the syntax for our bot 1 guess. Usually pipe text from embedded data follows this format, and then this is whatever your variable is. Just as rule of thumb, I would recommend for first-time users or people who aren't as familiar with this format, which is probably most people, you just use the menu so that you don't get any errors in your syntax, because it is a little bit picky. So if we want to perform a calculation with bot 1's response, we can pretty much copy paste this, go back to our survey flow, and do whatever operations we want with it. I typed out a sort of operation with that adds all 3 of the bots' guesses together. I pre-typed it because I didn't want to make any errors when I was typing it for you guys, because Qualtrics math is just, it's very volatile and doesn't accept any errors. So what we did in this operation is I sort of, if you can see, this is the pipe text for the bot 1 answer. You can see the bot behavior. It's a random function between 0 and 100. This actually, as a side note, is a syntax that's built in to Qualtrics. I'll just bot 1 example. If you want to, this is a side note, but if you want to do create a random guess between 2 numbers, you can go to random number and then enter your integer min and max, but that is not as important for now. So basically in this math equation, what we did is we inserted the pipe text for bot 1, bot 2, and bot 3. And there's a space between each pipe text and each operator, as well as between each. Another important thing is if you're using parentheses, you also need that space right here. So we have our spaces correctly. We're using a round function in this example, and I added a little multiplied by 1, so you can sort of see how you can add numerical operations to variable operations. Here, we have our spaces right here. And yeah, just something important to say with this is it's a trial and error process for the Qualtrics math. You're almost never gonna get it perfect the first time. A way you can test it is later in the survey, I'm gonna show you guys how to access variables and have them displayed so you can check to see if they're getting calculated correctly. So that's a good way to be able to check your math operations. If you've made a mistake, it'll probably say invalid expression, and then you're gonna have to go back and debug. So a smarter and simpler way to perform variable calculations is using JavaScript because it's not as syntax finicky. And you can add JavaScript into a survey using this button right here. I mean, if you click on whatever question you want to add the JavaScript into, there's a little menu option in the dropdown. The Qualtrics sort of user interface changes pretty often, so this might not be exactly where the JavaScript button is in whatever version of Qualtrics you're using in the future, but it'll always either be in a dropdown or as like one of these little features right here. And if you have questions on where it is, if that changes over the next couple updates of Qualtrics, you can definitely look that up, and there'll be someone that answers you in a forum. Okay, so the first step for using JavaScript for variable or response calculations is to initialize an embedded data variable that you're working with and want to populate using JavaScript math within the Qualtrics survey flow. And you do this by creating an embedded variable, which I just said. Sort of like, okay, so if we want to calculate the average of everyone's guesses, we're going to create an empty variable for average. I called it average1. I'm also trying to calculate the golden number, the winning number. So I created a variable called golden value. We're going to have these be empty variables. And the reason that they're empty is because later in the survey with your JavaScript, you're going to repopulate these answers with your calculations, and then you're going to be able to access it on a results screen or a later screen. So now that we've created these two empty variables that we want to populate using JavaScript. Oh, and a very important note here is that you do have to create the empty embedded variables if you want to save data using JavaScript. Otherwise, it's going to save to nothing. So yes. The second important thing to do is create a timing question between the place your participants entered their guess, which is this slider right here in our case, and the results display page, which is right here. So the way you do this is sort of what I've done here is I've created a page break between these two, the entry page and the results page, and that's where my that's where my JavaScript's going to go. And so this is just a plain text page. I entered a little loading text to let the participant know that that's what the page is for. And then I have added a timing question to make this loading page auto advance as fast as possible so the participant doesn't have to wait around while the JavaScript runs. So I've set auto advance at 1 second. That means that JavaScript calculation will happen really quickly and it'll go to the results page. It is important to store your JavaScript on a page that's before your results page so that Qualtrics can register the calculations you made and be able to access them later. So a simple display question and a time, just an overview of why the timing is important. A simple display question and a timer with a 1 second auto advance work together to give the JavaScript code a place to reside. When the JavaScript is put into the display question, or into this question, the code loads, runs, and finishes after the input question, which is in our case a slider, and before the output display on the results page. As a recap of what I was saying. So now we're going to go into our average value and golden value calculation within JavaScript. Here, so we're going to click this. And we have, this might look a little scary and it's not. I'm just going to break down what we've done here to calculate our golden value and our average value and save it back into the survey flow. So you can add your code into the onload or the onReady section. There's not too much of a difference between these two sections. The onload loads before the page runs, the loading page runs, and the onReady loads as the page runs. For our purposes, it doesn't matter because the page is displayed before the results page. But if you're doing something interactive or real time, where you put the code matters a little bit more, but not in our case. So first, we want to access our our bot behaviors through, and also the participant guess, so that we can do the average calculation through pipe text and setting the variables locally in JavaScript. So an easy way to access this pipe text, as we went through earlier, is just using that pipe text menu in an empty block and copy pasting the syntax, which we did before with the Qualtrics math. So after that, we can perform whatever mathematical operations we want in the JavaScript code. We can also create local JavaScript variables that will exist within the code to aid our calculations. Variables will only get saved back into the survey flow if you use the set embedded data command, which is here. So what we're doing here is we're piping in our, this is our slider value, and we got this little chunk of code from the pipe text accessing the slider value, the total sum of it, which is the slider value. And we're also, don't worry about these as much. This is more important. So here we're accessing our bot1 guess, our bot2 guess, and our bot3 guess. So now that we have our guess and the bot1, bot2, and bot3 guesses, we can calculate the average. As a safe, like just to be safe, I always use parse int whenever there's an integer or numerical answer for a question that I want to parse in, that I want to do math operations with, just because sometimes it'll be in a string format or something like that, and you just don't want to deal with it. So I always use parse int whenever I'm doing any numerical operations or I'm accessing any numerical data. So our first calculation we can see here is average, and I've added a parse int right before just to make sure it's an integer at the end. And as you can see, the JavaScript syntax is like a little less like problematic in terms of spacing and things like that. You can pretty much just do easy math equations. Something to note is that you always have to put a semicolon at the end of each line. And so what we did here is we added the bot1, bot2, and bot3 guesses along with our guess, which is stored as value guess. And we divided the whole thing by 4 to get an average. And so now we've saved our average as a local variable within the JavaScript. The next thing we do is we calculate golden value. And we're using, this is JavaScript syntax. You can sort of look up like, how do I round something in JavaScript, or how do I do another thing you could do is like absolute value. That would be math.abs. You can easily look up syntax for JavaScript. It's a lot more easily available than Qualtrics syntax. So what we did here is we parsed as the integer the average value that we just calculated. This is the local variable that we're accessing now, times 2/3, which is how we calculate the golden value according to the experiment. So now we have golden value saved as local variable. And now the way that we save these things back into the survey flow is through this set embedded data command. And the syntax for this is pretty much, always the same here. This is going to be your embedded variable name in the survey flow. And this is going to be your local variable. We don't have a local variable called local var. That's why it's not lining up as blue. And so what we've done here is we've saved our slider guess back into the survey flow. We've saved our average value back into the survey flow, and we've saved our golden value back into the survey flow with this set embedded data command. And this is very necessary if you want to save anything you're doing in the JavaScript back into the rest of your survey to access later. Okay, great. So now it's time to move on to our results screen, where we are accessing all of these beautiful values that we've calculated. So now that we've calculated our average guess and our golden value or winning value in the JavaScript previously, we can display these variables on the results screen by adding the pipe text for these variables. We can access them through the pipe text menu as we did before. I can go through that process again just to make it extra clear. So now that we've saved for example, our average guess back into the survey flow is with the JavaScript. We can insert the pipe text for this. Oops, it's not there. Okay, that's a little, I'll probably do it around down here. And this is how this, if I ran this, this would just display our average guess again, right there. But so, so here we see we accessed our pipe text for each bot behavior, the average guess, the golden value, and your guess. These three variables we saved using JavaScript, and these three were created in the survey flow, so they're easier to access without JavaScript. Now all we have to do is write some text around it to create a results display, and we're pretty much done. We can preview this screen and see that these variables are displayed. Sometimes there are errors in variable display. You sort of just have to push your way through it, keep testing. The nice thing about Qualtrics is there's this really easy preview function, so you don't have to like publish your survey and wait every time you want to test something. You can preview without having to wait. And it's with Qualtrics, it's always a process. You're never gonna get everything displayed right the first time. Even I've been working with Qualtrics for a while, and I had to really make sure that my syntax was correct for the display of these variables, and it wasn't working for a little bit. So I want that to be encouraging. But at the end of the day, like if you follow these steps, you should be able to create a pretty decent survey with some cool calculations. So now we're gonna run through the beauty contest one more time, and this time you know what's going on behind the scenes. This is a little preview function right now. It's really nice. I didn't have to publish the survey. So here's our instructions. I'm gonna make a little guess. I guessed too high, but, and great. Thank you everyone for your time. I hope this was helpful, and have a wonderful day.